I only have to do this 2 more times. You guys gonna miss me up here? I would like to. I'd like to say I'm gonna miss it, but it's a lot. No, I'm excited to be here to introduce Ted Nichols. I actually met him at MUDUC, so I've seen him in there quite frequently and kept texting him, when can you speak to Rotary? When can you speak to Rotary? Because he spoke on a Monday night, and I kept trying to get him here. So we got down to the wire. I had one date left available, and he took it for me, so I appreciate that. He is the president of the Lancaster County Bird Club, LCBC, and he will be giving us an overview of the Lancaster County-based nonprofit and the many activities the club is engaged with to promote bird conservation and birding in the area. The membership-based organization was founded in 1937 and is one of the oldest ornithological, did I say that right? Organizations in the country and has over 400 members. Ted has been a civilian public affairs corporate communication professional with the federal government for nearly 20 years and currently works for the U.S. Navy at Naval Supply Systems Command in Mechanicsburg. He also serves as a reservist. This is what I'm tired of doing. This is like always testing my vocabulary. Also working in public affairs in the Pennsylvania Air National Guard and is approaching 19 years of in uniform service. Ted was born and raised in South Central Pennsylvania and is also the former president of the Astronomical Society of Harrisburg. Additional details on LCBC are available at the lancasterbirdclub.org. So welcome, Ted.
Thank you, Denise. Really appreciate you guys having me here today. If you'll pay attention to that footnote, I'm a former president of the Astronomical Society of Harrisburg, and now I'm president of a bird club. So you might ask how one goes from being out at night to being out mainly in the daytime looking at birds. Well, it's pretty easy here in South Central Pennsylvania. Once you get involved in astronomy, you really realize how much weather sucks and how much you can't see the stars at night. I also aged, and as I got older, when it gets dark and it gets late, I sort of want to go to bed. I don't want to be out all night. So I moved on to birds, which is something that you can pretty much enjoy any time of the year, any weather. And I'll start by just saying a little bit about birding and why I think it's a great hobby. There are a litany of different benefits to birding in terms of mental health and the whole mindfulness movement. It's great to get out and connect with nature, great for your well-being, great for de-stressing. It's just a great way to get out and enjoy what's out there. But I also think that birding is sort of one of the most approachable hobbies. You know, you look at the hobbies that people can be involved with, and birding can get expensive. I'll tell you a little bit about that later. But it doesn't require much to get involved with birding. A simple pair of binoculars and a cell phone nowadays, and you can get involved in birding. I look at some of my friends who are into scuba diving or parachuting out of planes, and you look at the costs that are involved with that. So birding is a pretty approachable hobby when it comes to getting involved in the hobby itself. It's also something, one of the few hobbies in nature that is so easy to connect with. I'm almost positive right now that I could take each of you guys outside and within 10 minutes, we'd see a bird. Might not be a bird we really want to see, but you're going to see a bird within that 10 minutes. You know, there are people that go up to parts of northern Pennsylvania to see bears, and they can do that 8, 9, 10 times a year and they don't see a bear. But anytime I go outside to go birding, I'm going to see a bird. So I think that's part of what draws an interest to the hobby. The Lancaster County Bird Club was founded in 1937. We're a club with a long history. A lot of our early days sort of trace back to Millersville and F&M College and the ornithology departments that exist there. If you ever get a chance to go to the North Museum in Lancaster, right adjacent to the F&M campus, we have a partnership with the North Museum that goes back to the day that they were founded, originally by F&M. But if you go in the basement there, they have probably one of the most impressive bird collections of any museum on the East Coast. Sure, there's some bigger ones. It's at museums in New York and such, but it's really a treasure to have right here in Lancaster County. Unfortunately, none of those birds are alive. A lot of those, back in the day, they were collected through means of shooting birds. But you look at birds and you can see how conservation matters have changed since, just around the turn of when the 1900s came around. But it's a great opportunity to go down there and be able to see Pennsylvania bird life down in that basement. You walk through 3 rows and you can basically see what it would maybe take you a year to see here out in the wild in Pennsylvania. But we have over 400 or so members now. Just like Rotary, our real mission is service in the form of education. I sort of connect with the Rotary motto that you guys talked about, service above self. On the Air Force side, one of our core values is service before self. Maybe afterwards we can talk about the difference between that one word and if there's any meaning between service before self or service above self. But we do a lot of educational programming as part of our mission. Pretty much every month we offer a field trip of some sort that is open to the public to go out and go birding. We try and rotate around different sites in Lancaster County so that we are accessible to people from all corners of the county. So right here in E-Town, we do events down on the Conoy Canal Trail between Prescott and Bainbridge and down to Falmouth. We also do a field trip out on the other end of E-Town on the Conawago Rec Trail. Those are popular birding sites around here, and it sort of helps us to reach out to our members who are sort of on the Lancaster and Dauphin County line. Middle Creek is one of the big sites here that we are lucky to have in Lancaster County. It straddles the Lancaster-Lebanon line. Probably one of my most birded sites. Really is a treasure to have here in our backyard. You guys may only know it as a place to go see snow geese late winter, early spring, but it is a vibrant place to go and see birds year-round. Last year, we were really lucky to have 2 really rare birds show up there within about a week or 2 of each other. One was the first ever state record of a limpkin. Record keeping is a big part of birding and bird watching, but a limpkin is a bird more or less common to the southeast of the United States. If you go to Florida, you have most certainly seen them. They voraciously eat snails, but they have rapidly been expanding out as climate warms and conditions to the north are more hospitable to them. A little bit after that, we had a Hudsonian godwit, which is a type of a shorebird that showed up at Middle Creek, and we had some good press during those 2 or 3 weeks of rarities. Not to be outdone, just a little bit after that, we had the first ever records in Pennsylvania, unfortunately not in Lancaster County, of American flamingos. Last year there was a hurricane in September that timed itself well with the migration of American flamingos from Cuba to the Yucatan Peninsula. And as that hurricane was coming up during the middle of those birds' migration, it sent birds, I think the last count was like over 20 states got flamingos, when flamingos had only ever really been seen mainly in Florida, and they're hard to see there. So we had 2 flamingos down on a farm pond in Franklin County, outside of Chambersburg. So that was a very unique event for birding and had people coming here from up and down the East Coast. You'll sort of sense here that I've sort of went a little bit on rarities. And why am I sort of expounding on rarities first to sort of showcase the birding hobby? It's events like those that keep this hobby interesting. I can go out pretty much every winter, spring, summer, and fall, and right around this area, I could pretty much tell you the normal birds that we'll see in each of those seasons. But it's things that show up that aren't normal that really keep things interesting. And for people that don't travel, it's a great opportunity for them to see birds that they would not otherwise see. So in birding, we sort of call it chasing. When you go chase a bird that is something that you want to add to your list. So listing is a big component of birding. And you may hear me use the term birding. You may be more used to the term bird watching. I prefer the term birding because it shows more of an active hobby. I'm going out and seeking birds. I'm not sitting in my house just looking out the window to see what birds happen to come by the window at that time. While our club is made up of people who just enjoy feeding birds in their backyard and watching them from their window, a good portion of our club members are also what I would define as birders, in the sense that they really make it an active hobby. It's a great way to merge hiking with going out and enjoying wildlife, or kayaking. There's numerous islands out in the Susquehanna that we like to go out to and check out birds. But I will warn you, if you do get involved in birding, while it is a form of exercise, it's not the most strenuous form of exercise. It can take us a while to go a mile or two, especially if it's pretty active and we're stopping a lot to check out the birds that we're seeing. But birding is one of the most popular forms of outdoor recreation. When they look at that as a statistical level across the country, wildlife watching in general. But it's a great way, I think, to connect with nature and just explore our area. You know, the places that birding has taken me are places otherwise that I probably wouldn't have gone to. You know, I go to numerous state parks, but I've been to game lands that I probably never even knew existed until I decided to go there and go birding. I've just been to a whole wide range of areas that allow you to get out and enjoy what we have here in our backyard. As you get involved with birding too, I talked a little bit about listing. That can keep the hobby very interesting for people. So usually when you get involved with birding, people start keeping a list. Back in the day, that was done by pen and paper. The cell phone and the internet has really made that a lot easier now. I'll show a video soon. Most of us use a website that has an app that's done by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology called eBird. When I go out birding, I start a checklist on my phone, walk around, end it when I'm done, and every bird that I saw while I did that checklist gets logged in there. I submit it. It goes to a centralized database that anyone in this area can see, hey, here's what was spotted today down at Lancaster Central Park or any of the various hotspots around here. So it sort of collects that data and allows it to be accessible by all. It's also really valuable to science. It's like what we call citizen science. It's an ability for you as a casual birder or someone interested in the hobby to contribute to science with your observation. So all of our observations nowadays are mostly done through eBird. But every bird you see, you keep on a list. The first time you see a bird, that's called your life bird. So if you ever get in a room with birders and you hear some of these terms thrown around, a lifer is the first time you ever saw that bird. People will keep a list of all the birds that they've seen in their life. People will keep a list of all the birds that they've seen in Pennsylvania. People will keep a list of all the birds they've seen in Lancaster County. People will keep a list of all the birds that they saw at Chickies Park down here, just not far down the road on River Road. So it opens up all kinds of opportunities to challenge yourself and sort of keep things new every day. You know, in the middle of summer, once you might be bored with something, you might look at a map and say, hey, I've never been to Susquehanna State Park. I don't have any birds on my list down there. Let's go see what I can see. And that sort of keeps things interesting for people. What we also do, a lot of people, is we keep a year list. So basically every year that list resets and it becomes a goal of how many birds you can see in a year or how many birds you saw in that year. Another term that you'll see thrown around in the birding hobby is something called first of year or first of season. And first of year is simply the first time you see a bird that year. A lot of people go out on New Year's Day and try and rack up as many species as they can to get those off their list. First of season would be something you see first in the spring or something like that. I talked a little bit about what's involved to get birding in birding, and I'll showcase these. This is really all you need to get started in the hobby. But what you do when you get a pair of these can really impact how long you stay in the hobby. I can't count the times that we've led field trips and somebody shows up with like a $10 or $15 pair of binoculars that they bought at Toys R Us or Walmart, and they're plastic, and I've looked through them, and if I looked at something through those, I would never come back to the hobby again. So we often caution people to maybe borrow a pair from a friend that has a decent pair and make sure, but really in the range of $150 to $200 nowadays, you can get a great pair of binoculars. The cost of optics really goes down. There are some great high quality ones, and as you move up, things like Leica, Zeiss, or Swarovski. I'm a Swarovski person. A pair of these binoculars is going to cost you about $2,500. A scope like this is going to cost you about $4,000. But why the difference? This is what I use when I just walk around. I prefer a 10 by 50 pair of binoculars because I also like to use them for astronomy. That second number is how much light gathering power the binocular has, 50 millimeters. The first number that you see in binoculars is the magnification power, but the larger the number on that second number, 50 millimeters, another common one is 42 in the hobby, 8 by 42s, and a lot of people go by that because they're lighter when you don't have as much glass there. But these don't really bother me. As you get older and people start shaking and things, you might want to consider that magnification, because trying to hold a 10 pair of power of binoculars, if you have a little bit of shaking going on, it's just going to amplify that. But binoculars are sort of one of the most needed things to get involved in the hobby. Then you need some form of bird guide to tell you what you're seeing. Plenty of book options out there, but nowadays every guide that you want you can get on your cell phone. There are apps that will identify birds for you. If you've never heard of the app called Merlin, it's done by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. You can download that app. If you take a cell phone picture of a bird, put it in, you fill the box, it'll tell you what that bird is. It has a sound component that you turn on, and it will listen, and right away, it will tell you what bird you're hearing. To a lot of old school birders, I think they feel like they got duped, because a lot of people can get in and really figure out things very easier. But what I will caution everyone, cell phones are great. They're a great tool to birding, but they shouldn't be your only way of identifying something. If it's telling you that you're hearing something that probably wouldn't be around here, you might want to try and see that bird and actually confirm that that's what it's seeing, or listen and then listen to something later to make sure that it got it right. But the app is getting light years better than it was, and it's a great way to get introduced into birding. But we do have meetings each month. We hold our meetings the second Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. From September through March. Let me just make sure I'm right on that. September through March, we are at the North Museum in Lancaster. We meet in the planetarium there. Easily accessible spot. People can get to it through public transportation. We get a lot of students from F&M now that come to our meetings since we've moved there. April through June, 3 months, we sort of have our own spring migration, and we go to Middle Creek's Visitor Center over in Stevens on the Lancaster-Lebanon line. And in July and August, we meet at the Lancaster Conservancy's Climbers Run Nature Center, which is down in Peckway. But partnerships are a big thing for our organization. I like to say that we are an important tool in the toolbox of many other organizations like the Lancaster Conservancy and other conservation-based organizations that are working to conserve our land in Lancaster County, because that land that they're trying to conserve probably is an important place for birds as well. So we can help show the bird picture to some of these conservation stories. I do want to briefly show a video. I talked a little bit about eBird and the app that you can download to keep your bird observations. I'm going to show a quick little video from Cornell that sort of details that app. Are you ready? Yep.
Every day, millions of people around the world enjoy watching birds and recording their sightings. What if there were a way to take all of these observations, yours, ours, everyone's, and put them all in one place?
If we could do this, we would fundamentally transform not just birding, but science and conservation.
From this idea emerged eBird. Put simply, eBird is a way for anyone around the world to store their birding observations, their photos,
They're sound recordings and make them available to educators, scientists, and birders. It's incredibly easy to use, and it's incredibly powerful. All you do is let us know where you went birding, when, how far you traveled, and what you saw. It's powerful because hundreds of thousands of people all around the world are doing it, and it's growing. eBird already safeguards 500 million sightings, information that allows all of us to understand the movements and needs of birds at global scales. eBird maintains your lists for you and shares them with other birders from around the world. By sharing, it's now possible for anyone, anywhere, to find your target birds and the best birding hotspots any time of the year. Before eBird, there was no way to comprehensively understand population level movements of many species. By combining your sightings with remote sensed habitat data from NASA, we're able to generate species distribution models that provide an unparalleled view of where and when birds are in the landscape. Scientists and students all over the world are now able to use eBird datasets for their research at a variety of spatial scales. These observations help inform better conservation strategies, opening the door to the future of bird conservation. And this is just the beginning. With the help of millions of people who come to eBird each year, we are creating a free, open access system that is easy to use, fun, and rewarding. Rewarding for birders, for scientists, for conservationists, and ultimately the birds themselves. Go to eBird.org or download eBird Mobile to get started, all for free. By joining eBird, you're joining a global team of people that share your passion for birds. Be a part of it.
I will just say that conservation is another important part of our club. I really like, the term canaries in the coal mine really does apply to birds in most conservation matters that we have. If bird populations shrink and we start losing more and more birds, it's troublesome for a litany of different issues. One of the big issues we're involved with right now about trying to spread awareness on is the issue of birds and glass collisions. Most people don't really understand it, but it's something we can fix. Birds can't see glass, so unless you have a screen on your window, a lot of glass reflects the outside environment, and birds, when they need to sort of flee or fly somewhere, they see your window as a continuation of that environment. And most of the birds, once they impact a window, you might think it's fine, but over 80% of birds that collide with the window die. The number in the United States right now is over 1 billion birds each year die from window collisions, but it is something we can fix. We just held a big forum down at F&M in Lancaster about a week and a half or so ago. There are dot solutions that you can put on your window that allow that bird to see that it's a barrier that they can't pass. If you ever go out to Middle Creek's Visitor Center, the windows that overlook their feeder area have a product applied with those dots. When you're applying something to a window, just like one sticker is not going to work, because you got to sort of think of a window like a chain link fence. If a bird thinks it can fly through that hole, it's going to try and fly through there. So most scientific study has found you need some type of pattern in a 2x2 pattern to be able to prevent birds from going through a window. There are much more expensive coatings that can be applied to windows once they're initially installed to save birds, but that's probably on top of, unfortunately, feral cats, some of our biggest conservation concerns right now when it comes to birding, and bird numbers. But I left a brochure of the Bird Club's activities on everyone's table. Would encourage you guys to come out to one of our events if you have an interest. If you know someone who's interested in birding, let them know about us. On top of our normal monthly field trips, we have a special series of bird walks for beginners that are meant to be at the level of people who may never have went outside and birded. We have our monthly meetings again, second Thursday of every month, where we bring in some really high-class speakers to speak on a variety of different bird issues. And we just have a really vibrant membership who's here to help you grow in the hobby if that's something that interests you. So great group of people. What is sort of unique about us, we are unaffiliated. A lot of areas have an Audubon Society. We've proudly been independent since our founding in 1937, never been affiliated with a national organization. I like to also joke, you will see the acronym thrown around for us of LCBC. In recent years, it has become a little challenging for us, but if anyone ever asks, we are the OG LCBC. Since 1937, that's been our acronym, but much larger organization out there using that here locally now. But want to thank you guys for your time today. If anyone has any questions, feel free to talk to me afterwards. I can take some now as well if you have some. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so how many species is on your list? And how far have you gone to see specific birds?
Well, that's where we get into what I talked about earlier, sort of the rabbit hole you can fall down. I don't have my number memorized, but I'll pull that up now so I can give you some context. But most people in Pennsylvania, I would say, people who have been birding maybe for 30 or so years, really put an effort into it. About 300 bird species is a really respectable number in Pennsylvania. You start looking throughout the U.S., high 700s or 800s is about what you can see. In my bird time, since I've been birding, and I'll point out that I haven't been doing this for long. My intro to birding, I think somebody had asked about that, really started through work out at Fort Indian Town Gap. Before I worked for the Navy, I worked for the Army out at Fort Indian Town Gap. Then I went to the VA hospital. But the Lancaster County Bird Club came out there for a field trip one day, and my boss said, hey, we want you to go out and cover the bird club, visiting the Gap, write an article about it, and take some pictures. I quickly went out there, and I knew that there were like blue jays and cardinals and maybe about a dozen or so bird species. And by the end of that day, I think they had a list of like 80 to 90 species. And I sort of took that as a challenge that, hey, I need to sort of learn about this. So I got involved in birding shortly after that. So it was the summer of 2014 when I got involved in birding. And now I've seen just over 2,400 different bird species, which is nothing if you look at some. I think there was just an article on the person who has seen the most birds and finally broke a record, but has really made an effort to see those birds. His current list, he just went over the 10,000 number mark. But that's when you start doing that, it starts requiring a lot of money. I like right now to try and pick geographic areas that I haven't been that's going to give me a wide range of birds to see if I go there in 2 weeks. But I have been to Africa, I've been to India, I've been to the Caribbean, done a lot of travel in South America. But it's also a great way to travel because it really gets you out of that tourist zone to really be able to experience some of these countries and the way people live in that country and the culture and things like that. So birding is definitely my reason for going there, but it has definitely diversified my understanding of the human story.
So another threat, if I understand this correctly, is there's more and more of these large windmills being put up, not only in Pennsylvania, but other states.
Yep.
That can be a threat to birds.
Yeah, the issue with wind power, and it's not normally small birds. Most of the birds that I talked about that are hitting windows are our small songbirds. Most of the birds that are dying as a result of collisions with these wind turbines are our raptor species. And as they're looking into it, it really is a matter of them seeing them. I was just reading an article the other day about how painting them black or a different color could be more useful, but that is certainly also one of the other threats to our larger bird species. Kevin.
A couple years ago, HBO Real Sports had a segment on the World Series of Birding.
Yep.
Have you ever done that, by the way?
Yeah, so the World Series of Birding is sort of revolves around this concept of what's known as a big day. The total number of species that you can see in a 24-hour period. And if you've seen that, I think Steve Carell, when he was on the show, had his comedy show, did something with that as well. There's some great clips from that on YouTube. But it's a 24-hour period to go out and see as many birds as you can see. If you're looking for another great movie that sort of does that, there was a movie with Steve Martin, Jack Black that came out a few years ago called The Big Year. And it sort of chronicles, it's a true story of people that went out to try and do a big year in the United States with how many birds they could see in 1 year. So very humorous movie. I think it should have did better out there in the theaters than it did, but it's a good movie if you're on Netflix and want to sort of get a humorous side of birding.
Well, what was interesting, I thought the documentary that they did is 15, 20 minutes long. It was really fascinating. And I knew Mike Brubaker from Mooduk. That's the name of Mooduk is the name of his birding team. So that was kind of the connection there. But I often
Yeah, that's sort of like the holy grail of there is one up in State College, but that's probably the most well-known birding competition.
And it's just always kind of like, why New Jersey? Because I would not think of wildlife viewing as New Jersey being a state, but supposedly it's really good because of all the migration that goes up and down.
Yeah, most big days in those competitions are held during the prime of spring migration. So you're capitalizing on those birds that are making their way from South America up to the boreal forest in Canada to do their breeding. But New Jersey, why it sort of was selected, the whole state is very accessible within the period of a day. So most people that do that competition have a very methodic route that they follow. They'll start up in the meadowlands and the swampy areas of the north. They'll move south into the Pine Barrens, and they'll end in Cape May. But there is such a diversity of habitat in New Jersey that you can cover within a day to really get a large number of birds in that 24-hour period. Yes, sir.
I'm kind of wondering if there's much of a fudge factor here. I was with a birding group not too long ago, and people that know a lot more than I do, they would say, well, is it this or is it that, or I'm not sure. So at what point is it, yes, that nailed it. And when somebody reports, I saw this, and they're out there by themselves, I assume there's a certain subjectivity here and error factor.
Well, I will say on eBird, when you submit observations, each area has a reviewer. So any rare observations are vetted by a review team. Most of the time they're going to want pictures or a sound recording or drawing or some better description as to why you're seeing what you saw. But that is sort of one of the unique things about birding. Birding is very much on the honor system. People have different levels of what they will do to count a bird. Some people, if they hear a bird, they will not count that bird on their life list until they've seen that bird. And it can be a little difficult when you're getting into species like owls or nightjars, which are only hearing at night. I personally, my rule is I have to see a bird first to put it on my list, unless it is an owl or one of these night type species that you're only going to hear. Those are my personal rules. Some people want to and need to get a picture until they're going to count it. But observations are mainly on the honor system. But it's a pretty good self-policing hobby. If people start throwing weird things out there and weird numbers out there, it doesn't take long for someone to be sort of called out or fact-checked as far as their observations. But yeah, our local review community is pretty good. And anything that would be rare wouldn't hit an alert most of the times. You can sign up for unconfirmed reports, but they all have a unconfirmed or confirmed status in eBird if it's going to be something rare. Yes, sir.
My question was going to be the same thing, that whole issue that you answered. So my second question would be, does the current policy of the open border affect bird?
As far as on our southern border?
Is that why we're getting so many more birds through the thing? Biden's opened the border. Is that anything to talk about?
Well, you know, the issue of the border wall has had a special impact on the birding community because down on the southern border is sort of one of the better birding areas in the United States. The wall I would say has more of an impact on on our mammals and land-based birds that can't necessarily go through the wall. Luckily, birds have wings and can go over that wall. So I would joke that any border policies, in essence, unless it's a bird that really isn't a good flyer, is going to be able to fly over that. So, yeah, no real. In most of the spots of the new wall, I was down there about 2 years ago. It's metal and not really an issue. But
so how many people have you capitalized on from Pokemon Go into birds?
you know, that is actually I often talk about that in my talks when I talk to a younger audience. A lot of times, birding is sort of real world Pokemon Go, and a lot of people have made that connection. I play Pokemon Go, have played it, became very good activity to do in my off time on a military deployment. I would say there were a good 100 to 200 people each night on the base that I was deployed on that were doing that for something to do each night. But when I came back and after I had gotten that experience, I really drew the parallels between the people that are interested in birding and listing and Pokemon Go. You know, the goal in Pokemon Go is to catch all these different species that you can. They go in a catalog, it marks off that you've seen them, and that's more or less exactly what birding is. But what we're seeing in birding is actually real and something I can physically see and connect with. But definitely a lot of similarities, and I would often tell people, if you're into Pokemon Go, you really should look into birding, because it's a good extension of that interest. Yes, sir.
So I've been feeding birds for years, and is that cheating to bird watchers? Is there any reason that feeding birds is bad or anything like that for them?
Most people would say there's nothing wrong with feeding birds. It's a great activity. I personally don't feed birds outside of really the winter season. Winter is when some of those resources really get scarce for birds. But right now there is ample food out there on the landscape. Not going to fault anyone who wants to continue to throw seeds out there this time of the year. But you're going to get what a lot of backyard bird feeders really call their junk birds. And if you want to throw money into feeding grackles and red-winged blackbirds and things like that, go for it. But I assure you that there is enough out there for them to eat right now. But I mainly just feed during the cold months. But it's a great way to, especially on a snowy day, see what's going on in your backyard and really keep an eye on what we call in birding as to your patch, you know, which is the area right around your home. But this time of year is also the time you should be putting hummingbird feeders out. That certainly is something that's worthwhile to do. And if you haven't heard, red coloring is unnecessary when it comes to hummingbirds. As long as your feeder has some red on it, all you need to do is that sugar to water mixture. Don't even really need, yes, I realize it's convenient, but the best way to feed hummingbirds is to just mix it at home, make it fresh each time you're going to fill the feeder with no red dye. There are some studies that show that dye can impact hummingbirds.
And change the water frequently.
Yep, especially if you're in a sunny area, you're going to have a bunch of drunk hummingbirds that might kill themselves if that water ferments. So,
And that kind of segues into the whole pollinator question. How closely tied is pollinator habitat with good bird habitat?
you know, good pollinator habitat is good bird habitat. And that's one of the reasons why the bird club used to go out to Fort Indiantown Gap on an annual trip. They have a rare butterfly out there that is in an endangered status called the regal fritillary butterfly. End of June, early July each year, they offer tours of that habitat. But that grassland pollinator habitat is really one of the areas of conservation interest for ornithologists, because a lot of those birds, especially our grassland birds, are some of the birds in the most decline. Things like bobolinks, eastern meadowlarks, grasshopper sparrows. Those are all mainly migratory birds that come up here this time of year. But one of the other things that we see in those fields is, you know, I drive by a field this time of year right now, and I see it being cut. And it just, all I can think about is the number of grassland bird nests that are being destroyed in there. There are safe dates for doing that, but a lot of programs will mandate certain dates for cutting. But definitely pollinator habitat is extremely important to birds, and a lot of those pollinators are also an important source of food for birds. Yes, sir.
What are the bluebirds in this group?
Bluebirds. I will say that bluebird enthusiasts are sort of their own little breed. We have numerous people. I managed a bluebird trail out at the VA hospital, but the bluebird is just sort of this charismatic bird that was on the decline and really started to sort of disappear from our landscapes. But the biggest real problem that when you get into putting up bluebird houses that you'll find is competition for those boxes. We give out grants and scholarships to put up different conservation type aimed boxes and things like that, owl boxes, bluebird boxes. But when we get a proposal for bluebird boxes in from, say, a scout, one of our first questions, and if you talk to the Bluebird Society, Dean Rust, the president of that from Lancaster County, monitoring your bluebird boxes is what's really important. House sparrows will take those over. That's a non-native bird that legally can be removed or killed, as well as starlings and rock pigeons. Those are sort of the three birds that you can take out. But house sparrows are extremely ruthless when it comes to competing for a bluebird box, and it will really disappoint you when you have bluebirds sit in a box and you go there and find them dead at the work of a house sparrow.
Amen to all that. I've been a bluebird bird for over 20 years. And, sparrows, English sparrows, they're an enemy. And we don't talk about killing them at the Sonic Building, but we do. Because we got sensitive people out there. But we got a bunch of teams out there, and, it's nothing more delightful than to open up a bluebird box and see the babies in there and having mommy and daddy dive bombing me, just right there. And it's all good. We need to count them, we need to clean out the nest, and we need to make sure that the sparrows are handled. I mean, handled. And
All true. But when you look at kestrel boxes, that are put a lot, one of our biggest things with kestrel boxes, because of the larger size hull, are European starlings, and they, something not really often talked about, but that's part of proper management of nest boxes is removing non-native species that you can legally remove, so they're not competing for those cavities and those birds can thrive. But we do sort of check on that when we're giving out money for bluebird boxes and stuff, because it seems to be a great project of people to buy a box and put it in their backyard. But I will say 90% of people's backyard habitat is not good for bluebirds. It's good for house sparrows. So they put these boxes in their backyard, and all it does is keep, bringing up more and more English sparrows. So if you're going to put up boxes, make sure you're putting them in the right place. Make sure you're checking them. And that's important, so you're getting the birds that you really want to breed there. Any other questions? Really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you.